If you feel broken, listen to this. Not because I have answers. Not because I can fix you. But because I understand why you stopped trying. People think broken means dramatic. Crying all the time. Falling apart. Losing control. That's not what this is. Being broken usually looks quiet. You still wake up. You still go where you're supposed to go. You still do what's required. But something inside you is tired of caring. Not sad. Just worn. You don't feel hopeless. You feel flat. Life keeps happening, but it doesn't land. You laugh when you should. You nod when people talk. You say, "I'm fine," because it's easier than explaining. And maybe you don't even know how to explain anymore. This didn't happen all at once. You didn't wake up broken. It happened slowly. After trying again and again and again. After hoping and being disappointed. After caring deeply and feeling like it didn't matter. At some point, your mind made a deal. If I don't feel as much, it won't hurt as much. So it turned the volume down. Not off. Just low enough to survive. That's where you are now. Not lost. Not weak. Just disconnected. And the hardest part is this. Nothing feels wrong enough to justify how empty it feels. Your life looks okay. But it doesn't feel like yours. This audiobook is not here to push you. It's not here to tell you to be strong. You've already been strong for too long. This is a place to sit down without pretending. A place where you don't have to improve. You just have to be honest. We're not going to rush healing. We're not going to force hope. We're not going to pretend everything happens for a reason. We're going to talk about what it feels like when something inside you quietly shuts down. And how to begin reconnecting. Not all at once, not dramatically, but gently. At your pace. If you're listening to this, you haven't given up. You just stopped reaching. And that makes sense. So for now, don't try to feel better. Just stay. Stay with this voice. Stay with yourself. We'll take the next step together. Slowly. Safely. Let's begin. Before we talk about healing, we need to understand how people break quietly. Not from one moment, but from many small ones. That's where Chapter 1 begins. Chapter 1. How people break quietly. People don't break the way movies show it. There's no single moment where everything falls apart. No loud crash. No dramatic goodbye. No final scream. Most people break quietly. So quietly that even they don't notice it happening. It looks like a normal life from the outside. They wake up. They go where they're supposed to go. They answer messages. They show up just enough to avoid questions. But inside, something is slowly disconnecting. Not exploding. Not collapsing. Just shutting down. Let me tell you about someone. Not because their story is special, but because it's common. So common that you might recognize parts of yourself in it. His name doesn't matter. Because this story isn't about him. It's about the pattern. And the pattern shows up everywhere. He used to care. That's the first thing to understand. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't weak. He wasn't unmotivated. He cared deeply. When he was younger, he had ideas. Things he wanted to do. things he wanted to become. Not big, dramatic dreams. Just honest ones. He wanted to feel proud of himself. He wanted to matter. He wanted his effort to mean something. So he tried. At first, quietly. Then harder. He showed up early. Stayed late. Said yes when it was uncomfortable. Pushed himself even when he was unsure. And sometimes it worked. But more often, it didn't. Plans fell apart. People disappointed him. Opportunities didn't come. Effort didn't equal results. And no one teaches you how to process that. No one teaches you what to do when trying doesn't pay off. They just tell you to try again. So he did. Again. And again. And again. Each time, it cost him something. Not energy. Not time. Hope. Hope is expensive. People don't talk about that. Every time you hope, you put something at risk. And when hope keeps getting punished, the mind adapts. Not by quitting immediately. That would hurt too much. Instead, it does something quieter. It lowers expectations. He stopped aiming high. Not because he didn't want more, but because wanting hurt. So he told himself he was being realistic. That's how it starts. Not with giving up. With being practical. With keeping expectations low. With not getting too excited. It sounds mature, responsible, healthy. But something else is happening underneath. Your nervous system is learning something. It's learning that caring is dangerous. That trying costs too much. That hope leads to disappointment. So it pulls back. He didn't notice it at first. Most people don't. It doesn't feel like sadness. It feels like relief. Relief from pressure. Relief from expectation. Relief from emotional risk. You stop feeling disappointed because you stop expecting. And for a while, that feels good. Calm. Controlled. Safe. But safety has a cost. And the cost is aliveness. Weeks go by. Then months. Then years. And slowly, the world feels flatter. Food tastes fine, but not exciting. Music plays, but it doesn't move you. Conversations happen, but you're not really there. You're present, but distant. This is where people get confused. They think something is wrong with them. They start asking, why don't I feel anything? The truth is, you are feeling something. You're feeling protected. Your mind is doing its job. Emotional numbness isn't failure. It's defense. It's what happens when you've carried too much for too long without rest. It's what happens when effort feels unrewarded. He didn't wake up one day broken. He adapted. And adaptation looks responsible. Until one day, you realize. You don't really want anything anymore. Not because you're content. But because wanting feels pointless. That's the quiet break. No one sees it. Not friends. Not family. Sometimes not even you. You still function. But you don't connect. You still exist. But you don't engage. And the scariest part? Nothing forces you to stop. Life keeps letting you continue like this. Bills get paid. Days pass. and the numbness becomes normal. This is how people live years of their life half awake. Not because they're weak, but because no one taught them how to feel safely again. If this sounds familiar, I need you to hear this clearly. You are not broken beyond repair. You are not lazy. You are not defective. You adapted to survive. But survival is not the same as living. And the goal of this audiobook is not to tear your defenses down. It's to help you lower them without getting hurt again. We're not going to force emotions back. We're going to understand them. We're not going to demand motivation. We're going to rebuild safety. Because numbness isn't the end. It's the pause before healing. But before we talk about reconnecting, we need to understand something deeper. Why numbness feels safer than feeling. And why your body chose this path. In the next part of this chapter, we'll talk about the moment people stop trusting their emotions. And how disappointment quietly rewires the brain. That's where the real break happens. There is a moment most people remember. Not clearly. Not like a date on a calendar. But like a feeling. It's the moment they stop trusting how they feel. Not because feelings are wrong. But because feelings disappointed them. Again. For him, it happened slowly. One plan didn't work out. Then another. Then another. He didn't fall apart. He adjusted. When something excited him, he reminded himself not to get too excited. When something hurt, he told himself it wasn't that deep. When something mattered, he kept it to himself. Just in case. At first, this felt like maturity. He thought, I'm learning not to overreact. I'm learning to be calm. I'm learning to manage expectations. But something important was happening underneath. His body was learning a lesson. The lesson was simple. Feeling leads to disappointment. So the body did what bodies do best. It protected him. Every time he felt excitement, his chest tightened a little. Not from fear. From memory. From remembering how it felt when excitement didn't turn into anything. Every time he felt hope, his mind interrupted. Don't get carried away. Be realistic. Let's see how it goes. This is how numbness begins. Not as emptiness. As control. He wasn't trying to stop feeling. He was trying to stop being disappointed. But emotions don't work that way. You can't mute one feeling without muting others. You don't just turn down pain. You turn down joy. You don't just block sadness. You block excitement. You don't just silence fear. You silence desire. And slowly, the world loses color. Not all at once. A little at a time. He noticed it in small ways. Things that used to matter didn't hit the same. Good news felt okay. Bad news felt fine. Nothing felt urgent. Nothing felt meaningful. This is where people misunderstand numbness. They think it means nothing hurts. But numbness hurts differently. It hurts because nothing moves you. You laugh, but it doesn't stay with you. You succeed, but it doesn't land. You rest, but you don't feel refreshed. Life keeps happening around you, not inside you. And because it doesn't hurt loudly, you don't seek help. You don't think something is wrong. You think, this is just adulthood. You tell yourself this is what growing up feels like. busy, neutral, flat. But that's not adulthood. That's emotional shutdown. And the dangerous part? It feels responsible. You stop dreaming big and call it maturity. You stop wanting more and call it peace. You stop trying and call it acceptance. But deep down, you know something is missing. Not excitement. Not motivation. Connection. Connection to yourself. To your choices. To your own voice. That's why people who are numb often say this sentence. I don't know what I want anymore. Not because they never wanted anything, but because wanting became unsafe. If you're listening and thinking, this sounds like me, pause here. This is important. Nothing about this means you failed. Your system adapted to protect you. It learned that feeling deeply without safety is dangerous. So it chose numbness. Not because numbness is good, but because numbness is quiet. And quiet feels survivable. But surviving isn't the same as living. And deep down you know that. That's why you still listen to things like this. That's why something inside you hasn't given up. There is still a signal, even under the numbness. And that signal isn't pain. It's longing. Longing to feel real again. To care without fear. To want something without bracing for disappointment. But before we talk about how to feel again, we need to address something honestly. Why people stay numb even when they hate it. Why they don't just snap out of it. Because numbness offers something that feels too valuable to lose. Control. And in the next part, we'll talk about why control feels safer than healing and how people get stuck there. We'll explore the fear behind numbness. Not fear of pain, but fear of opening up and being disappointed again. There's a reason people stay numb even when they don't like it. And it's not because numbness feels good. It's because numbness feels predictable. And predictability feels safe. When you stop feeling deeply, nothing surprises you anymore. You don't get your hopes up. You don't feel crushed. You don't feel embarrassed for caring too much. Life becomes manageable. Not meaningful. Not alive. Just manageable. For him, this looked like routine. Same wake-up time. Same path through the day. Same distractions at night. He wasn't unhappy. But he wasn't happy either. He was neutral. And neutrality felt better than disappointment. Here's what no one explains. When you've been disappointed enough times, your brain starts avoiding risk automatically. Not big risks. Emotional ones. Caring about a goal is a risk. Believing in yourself is a risk. Wanting something deeply is a risk. Because if it doesn't work out, you feel foolish. So the brain makes a deal. If we don't care too much, we won't get hurt. That deal works for a while. It keeps you functioning. It keeps you calm. It keeps you from breaking down. But slowly, another problem appears. You stop moving forward. Not because you can't. Because nothing pulls you anymore. You don't chase. You don't build. You don't commit. You wait. And waiting feels smart. It feels patient. It feels safe. Until you realize how much time has passed. That's when people start feeling broken. Not in a dramatic way. In a confusing way. They wake up and think, Why don't I care the way I used to? They see others excited about life and wonder what's wrong with them. They scroll through their phone looking for something to feel. And nothing sticks. That's not laziness. That's exhaustion without rest. The body doesn't shut down emotions for no reason. It does it when it believes you've had enough. Enough disappointment. Enough effort without reward. Enough pressure to keep going. Numbness is the body saying, I need quiet. But the problem is, quiet can turn into isolation. He stopped sharing his thoughts. Not because no one cared, but because explaining felt tiring. He stopped making promises to himself, because breaking them hurt more than not making them. He stopped imagining a different future, because imagining felt like lying. And this is where the real damage happens. Not when you fail, but when you stop believing effort matters. That belief changes everything. You start choosing what feels easy, not because you're weak, because effort feels pointless. You choose distractions over direction, comfort over challenge, familiar over meaningful. And slowly, life shrinks. Not on the outside, on the inside. Here's something important to understand. People who feel broken are often very strong. They've carried responsibility. They've kept going when they wanted to stop. They've survived things quietly. But strength without rest becomes shutdown. And shutdown looks like numbness. If you're listening to this and thinking, I relate to this too much, that's not a bad sign. It means you're aware. Awareness is the first crack in numbness. Not motivation. Not action. Awareness. Because you can't heal what you don't notice. And you've noticed. Now, let me say something clearly. You don't need to force yourself to feel again. Trying to feel more usually backfires. It adds pressure. And pressure is what caused this in the first place. What you need first is safety. Emotional safety. Feeling returns naturally when the body feels safe again. Not when it's demanded. That's why this audiobook won't tell you to be positive, push harder, just try again. Those words don't help people who are numb. They make them feel more broken. Instead, we're going to rebuild something simpler. Trust. Trust in your own signals. Trust in effort again. Trust that caring won't destroy you. But that doesn't happen all at once. It happens in steps. And the next step is understanding this. Why people confuse numbness with who they are. Because numbness is not your identity. It's a state. And states can change. Slowly. Safely. Without force. In the next chapter, we'll talk about the biggest lie people tell themselves when they feel broken. The lie that keeps them stuck. If you've ever thought, this is just who I am now, Chapter 2 is for you. Because that belief is not truth. It's a response to pain. Chapter 2, the biggest lie broken people believe. When people start feeling broken, they usually believe one lie before all others. It sounds simple, almost logical, but it quietly locks them in place. The lie is this. This is just who I am now. Not said with drama. Not said with anger. Said calmly. Almost peacefully. This is just adulthood. This is just life. I used to care more. Now I don't. And that's fine. But it's not fine. It's resignation pretending to be acceptance. Let's go back to him. Because this is where the shift happened. At some point, he stopped questioning the numbness. He stopped asking why he felt flat. And instead, he adjusted his identity around it. He started calling himself not very emotional, not ambitious anymore, someone who doesn't need much. And every time he said that, it felt easier. Less pressure. Less expectation. Less disappointment. Identity is powerful. Once you name yourself something, you start protecting it. If he told himself, "I'm just not passionate," then he didn't have to try. If he told himself, "I'm not built for big things," then failure couldn't hurt. If he told himself, "I'm fine with less," then longing had nowhere to go. This is how people turn a temporary state into a permanent story. And stories are dangerous when they're written in pain. Here's what most people don't understand. Numbness feels like personality because it's consistent. You wake up the same way, react the same way, avoid the same things. So it feels stable. But stability doesn't always mean truth. Sometimes it just means habit. A broken arm held still long enough starts to feel normal. That doesn't mean it healed. It means you adapted. And adaptation is not the same as recovery. The lie "this is just who I am now" keeps people from asking better questions. Questions like, when did this start? What happened before I changed? What did I stop trusting? Instead, they shrink their lives to match the numbness. They choose routines that don't challenge them. They avoid environments that might wake something up. They stay busy enough not to feel. And the longer they do this, the harder it becomes to imagine anything else. Because imagination requires feeling. Let me be very clear here. You're not broken because you changed. People change when they're overwhelmed. People change when effort goes unrewarded. People change when they carry too much alone. That doesn't mean the old you is gone. It means the old you is protected. Think about this. If a child touches a hot stove and gets burned, they don't stop having hands. They just pull back. They learn caution. They learn boundaries. Emotional numbness works the same way. Your system pulled back to prevent more damage. The problem isn't the pulling back. The problem is never learning how to move forward again. Another part of the lie sounds like this. If I don't feel, I won't get hurt. And that's true. But it's incomplete. If you don't feel, you also don't connect. You don't grow. You don't change. You don't heal. Pain is not the enemy. Unprocessed pain is. The goal isn't to feel everything all at once. That would overwhelm you. The goal is to stop confusing numbness with strength. Because numbness is not strength. Strength is being able to feel and stay present. Numbness is leaving the room early. He told himself he was low maintenance. But what he really meant was, I don't expect much anymore. He told himself he was independent. But what he really meant was, I don't ask for help. He told himself he was content. But what he really meant was, I stopped wanting. Those words sound mature. But they hide grief. Grief for the version of himself that believed life could feel more alive. Grief for effort that didn't pay off. And here's the part most people miss. You can't grieve what you refuse to admit you lost. That's why people stay stuck. They never say, something mattered to me, and it didn't work out. They skip straight to acceptance. But acceptance without grieving is just shut down. If you've been telling yourself, this is just who I am now, I want you to pause. Not to judge that thought, but to question it. Ask yourself, when did I start saying this? Was it after a disappointment? After a loss? After repeated effort without reward? Because identities formed in pain are not permanent truths. They're temporary shelters. Shelters keep you safe. But they are not where you live forever. You are not your numbness. You are not your exhaustion. You are not the version of yourself that learned to shut down. Those are responses, not definitions. In the next chapter, we're going to talk about something difficult. Why healing often feels scarier than staying numb. And why people resist change even when they want relief. Because once you understand that, you'll stop fighting yourself. If you've ever thought, healing sounds good, but I don't know how. Chapter 3 is where that begins. Not with force. With understanding. All right. We move forward cleanly, grounded, and listener first. Chapter 3. Why healing feels scarier than staying numb. If you've ever wondered why you don't just fix it, even though you know something is wrong, this chapter is for you. Most people think numbness is the problem. It's not. Numbness is the solution the body chose, when everything else felt too dangerous. And once you understand that, you stop hating yourself for staying stuck. Let's talk about him again. Because this is where his story deepened. There were moments when he almost changed. Moments when something inside him stirred. A song that hit too close. A conversation that lingered. A quiet night where he felt the weight of his life more clearly. And every time that happened, something else followed. Fear. Not loud fear. Not panic. A subtle tightening. A thought that said, don't open that door. Because opening meant feeling. And feeling meant risk. Here's what no one explains. Healing feels unsafe. When numbness has been your protection. To the outside world, he looked fine. Functioning. But inside, his nervous system had learned one rule. Staying neutral keeps me alive. So when hope appeared, his body didn't celebrate. It resisted. When opportunity showed up, he hesitated. Not because he didn't want more, but because more meant exposure. And exposure once hurt. People assume healing is about adding something. More confidence. More courage. More action. But real healing begins with subtraction. Removing the belief. That pain will always follow feeling. He wasn't afraid of failing. He had failed before and survived. He was afraid of wanting again. Because wanting had once left him empty. This is why people stay numb. Not because they're weak. But because hope feels irresponsible. When disappointment is familiar. Disappointment feels survivable. Hope feels like standing on thin ice. You don't know if it will hold. So you stay on the shore. Cold. Safe. Still. The problem is, safety without movement becomes stagnation, and stagnation slowly turns into despair. Not dramatic despair. The quiet kind. The kind that says, "This is just how life is." Let's make this very clear. Your body doesn't resist healing because it hates you. It resists because it doesn't trust what comes next. Trust was broken somewhere. Maybe when effort wasn't rewarded. Maybe when love wasn't returned. Maybe when you showed up and were ignored. Your system learned a lesson. Don't reach too far. And that lesson stayed, even after the danger passed. This is why advice doesn't work. Just try again. Just open up. Just feel your emotions. Those words skip the most important step. Safety. Healing only happens when the nervous system feels safe enough to feel, not forced. That's why pushing yourself often backfires. You push and shut down harder. This is not failure. This is protection doubling down. Think of it like this. If you were injured in the dark, your body would flinch at shadows later. Not because the shadow is dangerous, but because the memory still lives in your body. Healing isn't convincing yourself you're fine. It's teaching your body that the danger is over. Slowly. Repeatedly. This is why numbness feels easier. It requires nothing. No risk. No exposure. But it also gives nothing back. No joy. No depth. No aliveness. He realized something important one night. He wasn't tired of life. He was tired of bracing, of holding himself in all the time. Numbness takes effort. It just hides it well. Holding your breath quietly is still exhausting, even if no one sees it. That's why people say, "I don't know why I'm tired." They're tired from not feeling. So how does healing begin? Not with feeling everything. Not with dramatic release. Not with forcing yourself open. Healing begins with permission. Permission to feel a little. A little sadness without drowning. A little joy without suspicion. A little desire without shame. Just enough to prove you can survive it. The nervous system learns through experience, not logic. Every time you feel something, and nothing bad happens, safety grows. Every time you reach a little, and don't collapse, trust rebuilds. This is why healing is slow, and why rushing it feels wrong. Your body is asking one question. Can I trust you not to abandon me again? And that trust is earned through consistency, not intensity. Small moments. Small honesty. Small courage. He didn't wake up healed. He woke up curious. And curiosity is safer than hope. It doesn't demand. It just asks, what if things could be different? That question didn't scare him. It didn't promise anything. It just opened space. And space is where healing starts. If you've been resisting change, if healing feels overwhelming, there is nothing wrong with you. Your system is doing its job. The next step isn't pushing harder. It's learning how to feel safe again. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how people begin to feel again, without overwhelming themselves, without reopening old wounds too fast, and without losing control. Chapter 4: How People Lose Themselves Without Realizing It. Most people don't wake up one day and say, "I've lost myself." It happens quietly, slowly, in ways that don't feel dangerous at first. This chapter is about that quiet drift, the one that happens while you're still functioning. Because losing yourself doesn't mean falling apart. It often looks like holding it together. Let's go back to his story, because this is where things changed without him noticing. He didn't stop caring all at once. He just started choosing what was easier. Easier mornings. Easier conversations. Easier expectations. At first, it felt like relief. He told himself he was being realistic. Life isn't supposed to be exciting all the time. People grow up. And he was right. But only halfway. Growing up doesn't mean shrinking inside. It doesn't mean lowering your inner volume until nothing stirs. But that's what happened. Not because he chose it, but because he stopped choosing anything at all. He let momentum decide for him. He followed routines without checking if they still fit. Stayed in patterns because changing felt tiring. He stopped asking simple questions like, "Do I still care about this? Does this matter to me? Is this how I want to spend my days?" Not because the answers were scary, but because asking felt unnecessary. And that's how people lose themselves. Not through crisis. Through comfort mixed with neglect. Through days that blur together. Through choosing what doesn't challenge them emotionally. Because challenge risks feeling. And feeling had become unfamiliar. Unsafe. He started describing his life with words like, "Fine. Okay. Can't complain." Those words sound harmless, but they hide absence. Absence of excitement. Absence of longing. Absence of self-recognition. He stopped recognizing himself in his own life. Not dramatically. Just subtly. Like hearing your name less often. Like forgetting what used to light you up. Here's the part that matters. Losing yourself doesn't mean you failed. It means you adapted. You adapted to pressure. To disappointment. To unmet expectations. To responsibilities that didn't leave room for you. And adaptation is intelligent. But it's not meant to be permanent. Because adaptation without reflection turns into erasure. Think about this. When was the last time you did something because you genuinely wanted to? Not because it was expected. Not because it was easy. Not because it filled time. But because it felt like you. If that question feels hard to answer, that's not failure. That's information. It tells you something important was set aside. Most people believe losing themselves means becoming someone else. But it usually means becoming smaller. Less curious. Less expressive. Less alive internally. Still responsible. Still present. Still reliable. But no longer connected. And connection is what gives life meaning. He noticed it in small moments. When weekends felt empty instead of restful. When achievements felt flat. When praise didn't land. He would ask himself, "Why doesn't this feel like I thought it would?" And then he'd dismiss the question. Because dismissing was easier than answering. because answering meant admitting something was missing. This is the quiet cost of disconnection. You keep functioning, but you stop belonging to your own life. You exist inside it without inhabiting it. Let me say this clearly. You don't lose yourself because you're careless. You lose yourself because you're trying to survive without pain. And in doing so, you mute everything. The danger isn't numbness itself. The danger is mistaking numbness for maturity. Saying things like, "That's just how life is. Everyone feels like this. I should be grateful." Gratitude is important. But gratitude should expand you, not silence you, not shrink your inner world. You are allowed to want more feeling, without wanting more chaos. You are allowed to want meaning, without wanting intensity. You are allowed to want yourself back, without blaming who you became to survive. The good news is this. You don't have to find yourself. You have to stop abandoning yourself. The self you're looking for never left. It just stopped being invited. Stopped being listened to. Stopped being prioritized. And like any neglected relationship, it waits quietly. Not angry. Just distant. Waiting to be acknowledged again. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something practical. How people begin reconnecting. Not through big changes, but through small, honest signals. How "I'm just busy" slowly replaces "this is my life." There's a moment most people remember later. Not when they lost themselves, but when they stopped noticing. For him, it happened in a normal way. Nothing dramatic. He woke up, checked his phone, got ready, and went out. Same routine. Days passed. Then weeks. At some point, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he felt excited about a day ahead. Not sad. Just blank. Neutral. If you asked him how life was going, he'd say, "Busy." Busy is a safe word. It ends conversations. People hear busy and assume purpose. They assume progress. But busy doesn't mean alive. It just means occupied. Here's what his days looked like. Wake up. Do what's required. Respond to messages. Scroll when tired. Sleep. Repeat. Nothing in that schedule was wrong. That's why it went unnoticed. He wasn't wasting his life. He was using it up quietly. At first, he told himself this was temporary. Things will slow down later. I'll focus on myself soon. After this phase. But later kept moving. And soon never arrived. This is how people lose themselves. They don't choose it. They postpone themselves. The hardest part? No one warns you. Because from the outside, you look responsible. You show up. You handle things. You're doing what you're supposed to do. But inside, something important goes quiet. Your inner voice stops interrupting. It stops asking questions. It stops pushing back. And when your inner voice goes quiet, life gets easier, but flatter. You stop arguing with yourself. Stop dreaming out loud. Stop wanting things you can't explain. This happens to teenagers too. Not just adults. A teen who once loved drawing stops because it feels pointless. They say, "It doesn't matter." A student who once asked questions stops raising their hand. They don't want attention. A young person who wanted to try something new keeps saying, "Maybe next year." Different age. Same pattern. Life becomes something you manage, not something you participate in. Here's the dangerous part. The longer you live this way, the more normal it feels. You stop missing yourself because you forgot who you were. This is not depression. And it's not laziness. It's disconnection. Disconnection happens when effort feels pointless. When care feels expensive. When disappointment trained you to expect less. He didn't lose himself in one choice. He lost himself in thousands of small ones. Choosing comfort over curiosity. Choosing distraction over reflection. Choosing later over now. And none of those choices felt wrong. That's why they worked. But one night, something happened. He caught himself saying, "This is fine." And for the first time, he didn't believe it. Not panic. Not fear. Just a quiet realization. I don't feel like I'm living my own life. That sentence didn't come with answers. But it came with honesty. And honesty is where reconnection starts. You don't find yourself by changing everything. You find yourself by noticing. Noticing when your days feel empty. Noticing when you avoid silence. Noticing when you say, "I'm fine," too quickly. Because losing yourself isn't a failure. It's a signal. A signal that something inside you wants to be acknowledged again. You don't need to go back to who you were. You need to move toward who you stopped listening to. And that doesn't happen all at once. It starts with one small reconnection. One honest moment. One question you don't ignore. In the next chapter, we'll talk about that first reconnection. If you've ever felt like life is happening around you instead of with you. Chapter 5 is about stepping back in. Chapter 5, the first signs you're coming back to yourself. Coming back to yourself doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It doesn't feel powerful. It feels small. Almost easy to miss. Most people expect healing to announce itself. A big realization. A sudden shift. A clear moment of change. But that's not how it works. Especially when you've been disconnected for a long time. Reconnection whispers before it speaks. And if you're not paying attention, you'll dismiss it. Let's go back to him again. Because this is where things quietly started to change. Nothing in his life changed yet. Same routine. Same responsibilities. Same environment. But something subtle happened. He started noticing things again. Noticing is the first sign. Not motivation. Not confidence. Awareness. One evening, he sat alone without reaching for his phone. Not as a rule. Just because he didn't want the noise. That moment didn't feel productive. It felt uncomfortable. His mind wandered. Thoughts surfaced. For a few seconds, he almost reached for distraction. Then he stopped. Not forcefully. Just paused. That pause mattered more than he realized. Here's something important. Reconnection often starts as discomfort without escape. When you've been numb, stillness feels loud. So most people run from it. They fill it quickly. But when you stay, even for a moment, you begin to hear yourself again. That night, he noticed something simple. He missed parts of himself. Not dramatically. Just quietly. He missed caring. He missed feeling interested. He missed being curious about his own life. That thought didn't energize him. It softened him. And softness is a sign you're coming back. Most people think healing makes you tougher. It doesn't. It makes you more sensitive. More honest. Sensitivity is not weakness. It's responsiveness. It means something inside you is awake again. Another sign showed up the next day. He caught himself reacting differently. A conversation annoyed him. Normally, he'd ignore it. This time, he felt it. Not explosively. Just clearly. Feeling irritation isn't regression. It's information. Numbness would have flattened it. Awareness let it speak. That's another sign. You start having reactions again. Not uncontrollable ones. Honest ones. Joy feels small but real. Frustration feels sharp but short. Sadness comes without swallowing you. You don't feel better. You feel present. And presence is the doorway back. For teens, it looks like this. Suddenly caring again about something small. A song hitting differently. A thought lingering longer than usual. Wanting to try something you'd written off. For adults, it looks like realizing you're tired of autopilot. Not burnt out. Just done drifting. Both are signs. Neither should be ignored. Here's a mistake many people make at this stage. They rush. They think, oh, I'm feeling again. I should change everything. That often pushes them right back into shutdown. Reconnection needs patience. Not pressure. Your system is testing safety. It's asking, can I feel without being overwhelmed? The answer needs to be yes. Repeatedly. So the work here is simple. Not easy, but simple. You protect small signals. When you feel curious, don't kill it. Let it stay. When you feel tired of distraction, listen. Don't force stimulation. When something matters a little, don't dismiss it for not being big. Small feelings rebuild trust. Big demands break it. He didn't make promises to himself. He made space. Space to notice. Space to respond. Space to not numb out immediately. And slowly, something changed. Life didn't get exciting. But it got real. Moments stopped blurring together. Days felt distinguishable again. That's a huge shift. Even if it feels ordinary. Here's the truth. You don't come back to yourself by intensity. You come back by consistency. Showing up to small moments. Staying present when you want to escape. Letting yourself feel without rushing to define it. If you're noticing more lately, if things feel slightly sharper, that's not you falling apart. That's you reconnecting. And the next challenge is learning what to do with that awareness. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something many people fear at this stage. Responsibility. Not responsibility to others, but responsibility to yourself. Chapter 6. When you realize you can't go back. The moment responsibility appears. There's a moment that comes after reconnection. It doesn't feel warm. It doesn't feel hopeful. It feels heavy. Because once you start feeling again, you start noticing something uncomfortable. You can't pretend you don't know anymore. Before, numbness gave you an excuse. I didn't feel like it. I wasn't in the right headspace. I wasn't myself. But now, you are present enough to notice your own choices. And that's where responsibility enters. Not the loud kind. The quiet kind that says, if I keep living this way, it's on me. This realization scares people more than pain. Because pain can be blamed. Responsibility cannot. Let's go back to him. Because this was the point he almost stopped again. Once he started noticing his life, he also started noticing avoidance. The things he kept putting off. The conversations he avoided. The habits he knew weren't helping. Before, those things were invisible. Now they weren't. And that awareness created pressure. He thought, if I see this and don't change, what does that say about me? This is where many people shut down again. Not because they're lazy, but because responsibility feels like a trap. They confuse responsibility with punishment, with pressure, with becoming harsh on themselves. So they retreat. Back to numbness. Back to distraction. Back to I don't care. But here's the truth. Responsibility is not about forcing change. It's about acknowledging agency. Agency means this. You are no longer helpless. That sounds empowering. Until you realize it removes excuses. He noticed this when he said, I should really stop doing this. That word should scared him. Because it implied choice. And choice means consequence. Here's something important for you to hear. Responsibility doesn't mean you must fix everything. It means you stop lying to yourself. You stop saying, I don't know what's wrong, when you actually do. You stop pretending habits don't matter. You stop telling yourself you'll change one day without knowing what that means. This stage feels uncomfortable because it removes denial. And denial was protecting you from guilt. But guilt is not the goal here. Clarity is. Clarity says, I see where I am. I see how I got here. And I see what I keep choosing. That's not shame. That's awareness. Awareness is the foundation of real change. Teenagers feel this too. A teen realizes they're choosing their phone over learning something they care about. An adult realizes they're choosing comfort over growth every night. Different ages. Same crossroads. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's why this chapter matters. Because this is where people decide. Do I step forward? Or do I go back to sleep? In the next part, we'll talk about how to take responsibility without becoming cruel to yourself. If responsibility scares you, it's not because you're weak. It's because you don't yet know how to carry it gently. Carrying responsibility without breaking yourself. Here's what most people get wrong about responsibility. They think it means pressure. They think it means becoming strict, harsh. They think it means waking up one day and suddenly being disciplined, focused, perfect. That misunderstanding is why people run from it. Because they don't want to become someone they hate. But responsibility, real responsibility, is not about control. It's about honesty. Let's go back to him. Because this is where he almost burned himself out again. Once he noticed his avoidance, His first instinct was to overcorrect. He made rules. Strict ones. No more wasting time. No more excuses. I'll fix everything starting tomorrow. And for a few days, he pushed hard. He forced himself to do things he'd avoided. He stayed busy. He ignored tiredness. He ignored resistance. From the outside, it looked like progress. Inside, something familiar started happening. Tightness. Irritation. The same pressure that once led him to shut down. That's when he realized something important. Responsibility carried with fear turns into self-punishment. And self-punishment always leads back to numbness. So he stopped. Not quitting. Recalibrating. Here's the shift he made. Instead of asking, "What should I be doing?" he asked, "What am I willing to be responsible for today?" That question changed everything. Responsibility became smaller, manageable, human. He stopped trying to fix his whole life. He chose one thing. One habit he knew mattered. And instead of forcing it, he made a quiet agreement with himself. I will show up for this, even when I don't feel like it. Not perfectly. Not intensely. Just consistently. That's responsibility done right. It's not loud. It doesn't announce itself. It's the moment you say no to distraction without drama. The moment you stop lying to yourself about tomorrow. The moment you choose action over negotiation. This applies to everyone. A teen deciding to practice something for 10 minutes instead of scrolling. An adult deciding to have one honest conversation they've been avoiding. Responsibility is not about doing more. It's about doing what matters, on purpose. And here's the most important part. Responsibility builds self-trust. Every time you do what you said you would, something inside you stabilizes. You stop feeling scattered. You stop doubting yourself as much. You stop needing motivation. Because trust replaces it. Motivation is fragile. Self-trust is solid. And self-trust only comes from kept promises. Small ones. You don't rebuild yourself with grand gestures. You rebuild yourself with quiet follow-through. That's why responsibility feels heavy at first. You're not used to carrying it gently. But once you learn how, it becomes grounding. It gives your days structure. Not rigid structure. Supportive structure. You stop floating. You stop drifting. You start standing somewhere again. And here's the part most people miss. Responsibility gives you back your freedom. Not freedom to do whatever you want. Freedom to trust yourself. Freedom from constant negotiation. Freedom from guilt. Freedom from that quiet disappointment you feel at night. That's what responsibility really is. Not a burden. A bridge. A bridge from numbness to presence. From avoidance to agency. From I don't know what's wrong to I know what I'm choosing. You don't have to cross that bridge all at once. Just take one step. Choose one thing today that you won't negotiate with yourself about. Keep that promise. And tomorrow, do it again. That's how responsibility becomes strength. Quiet strength. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when self-trust begins to return. When you start trusting yourself again, life feels different. Not easier, but steadier. Chapter 7. When self-trust starts to return. There's a moment people don't talk about enough. The moment self-trust starts coming back. It doesn't feel exciting. It feels unfamiliar. Because for a long time, you've lived without trusting yourself. And you learned how to survive that way. So when trust returns, it doesn't arrive like confidence. It arrives like steadiness. Let's go back to him. Because this is where something important shifted. After he began keeping small promises. Not big ones. Not dramatic ones. Just simple follow-through. Something changed in his body. He stopped feeling scattered all the time. Not calm exactly, but less chaotic. Before, his days felt like this. Lots of thinking. Very little direction. Now, his days had weight. Not pressure. Meaning. Self-trust doesn't say, I believe in myself. It says, I'll do what I say I'll do. That difference matters. Because belief is fragile. Follow-through is solid. He noticed it in small moments. When a task came up, he didn't argue with himself as much. Before, every action came with negotiation. Later. Maybe. After this. Now, decisions felt cleaner. Not easier. Just clearer. That clarity created space. Mental space. Emotional space. When you don't trust yourself, your mind is always busy. Busy managing guilt. Busy justifying delay. Busy replaying promises you didn't keep. Self-trust quiets that noise. Not because life gets easier, but because you stop fighting yourself. This is where many people get confused. They expect self-trust to make them fearless. It doesn't. He still felt resistance. Still felt doubt. Still had days he didn't want to show up. The difference was simple. He showed up anyway. Not angrily. Not perfectly. Just honestly. And every time he did, something inside him relaxed. Because consistency creates safety. Safety creates confidence. Not the loud kind. The grounded kind. This is especially important if you felt broken. When you're broken, your mind doesn't need motivation. It needs proof. Proof that you won't abandon yourself again. Self-trust is built when your actions say, I'm here. I'm staying. I'm not disappearing when it gets uncomfortable. This changes how you feel about the future. Before, the future felt heavy. Uncertain. Like something you had to escape. Now, the future feels manageable. Because you trust the person walking into it. That's the real shift. Not believing life will be easy. But believing you can handle yourself in it. This applies to teens too. A teenager who keeps small promises stops feeling lost. They don't suddenly know their path. They just stop doubting themselves constantly. An adult who follows through stops feeling fake in their own life. They stop saying I should and start saying I will. That shift rebuilds identity. Quietly. You stop asking, what's wrong with me? And start asking, what's the next right thing I can do? That question is powerful. Because it brings you back to the present. Self-trust doesn't live in the future. It lives in today. In one choice. One action. One promise kept. Here's something important to remember. Self-trust doesn't make you rigid. It makes you stable. You're allowed to rest. You're allowed to change plans. But you stop lying to yourself. And that honesty feels relieving. He realized something one morning. For the first time in a long while. He wasn't disappointed in himself. That didn't make him proud. It made him calm. Calm is underrated. Calm is what lets you think clearly, choose wisely, and stay present. Self-trust doesn't fix your life. It gives you a foundation. And from that foundation, everything else becomes possible. In the next chapter, we'll talk about a common mistake people make here. What happens when confidence returns before clarity does? If you've started feeling steadier lately, but also slightly unsure, Chapter 8 will help you understand why. Chapter 8: When confidence comes back before clarity. This is a tricky stage. One that quietly pulls people off track right when things start improving. Confidence begins to return, but clarity hasn't arrived yet. You feel better, more capable, less numb, less stuck. And that's where the danger is. Because feeling better can make you forget why you were careful in the first place. Let's go back to him. Because this is where he almost rushed again. After rebuilding some self-trust, he felt lighter. Not euphoric, but steady enough to move. And movement felt good. For the first time in a long while, he had energy. That energy whispered, "Now go fix everything. Now make big changes. Now prove you're not broken anymore." This is where people mistake confidence for readiness. Confidence says, "I can." Clarity says, "I know why." Without clarity, confidence rushes. It jumps ahead. It skips steps. It creates pressure again. He felt the urge to start 5 new habits. Commit to plans he hadn't thought through. Say yes to things just to feel productive. This felt different from before. Healthier. But underneath, the pattern was familiar. He was trying to outrun uncertainty. Confidence without clarity is still avoidance. It just looks better. This happens to teens too. A student feels motivated again and suddenly says yes to everything. Clubs, projects, plans. They burn out fast. An adult feels stronger and takes on too much at once. Old exhaustion returns. They say, "See? I knew this wouldn't last." But it wasn't healing that failed. It was pacing. Here's what clarity actually is. Clarity is understanding your limits without resenting them. It's knowing what matters before chasing what's possible. It's choosing direction over speed. Confidence gives you energy. Clarity gives you alignment. Without alignment, energy scatters. That's why people feel better, but still confused. They're moving again, but they don't know where. This is the moment to slow down. Not stop. Slow. He learned to ask a different question. Not, "What can I do now?" but, "What actually matters to me right now?" That question is uncomfortable. Because the answer isn't always exciting. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's small. But it's honest. Clarity grows from honesty, not urgency. This is where people rebuild wrong. They chase momentum instead of meaning. Meaning takes patience. Momentum rewards speed. Speed feels good. Until you crash again. Here's a grounding truth. You don't need to prove you're better. You need to protect what you've rebuilt. Confidence is fragile early on. Clarity stabilizes it. So at this stage, your job is simple. Choose fewer things. Say no more often. Let confidence settle into rhythm. He stopped asking, "How fast can I change?" and started asking, "How can I stay consistent?" That shift kept him from collapsing again. Confidence without clarity leads back to burnout. Clarity without confidence leads to stagnation. You need both. In the right order. Confidence first. Then clarity. Then commitment. And commitment should feel calm. Not frantic. If you feel pressure to rush right now, that's your signal to slow down. Healing doesn't ask for speed. It asks for honesty. In the next chapter, we'll talk about something crucial. How people rebuild meaning without overwhelming themselves. If you've been moving again but aren't sure what direction is right, Chapter 9 will help you choose wisely. Chapter 9. How to choose a direction without overwhelming yourself. Once confidence returns and you slow yourself down enough to seek clarity, a new question appears. What do I do next? This question sounds simple, but for someone who has felt broken or numb, it can feel heavy. Because choosing a direction means choosing something and leaving other things behind. That's where overwhelm begins. Let's go back to him. Because this is where he froze again. Briefly. He had energy. He had steadiness. But when he looked at his life as a whole, everything felt possible and impossible at the same time. So many things he could work on. So many areas that felt unfinished. Career. Health. Relationships. Personal growth. Each one mattered. And because each one mattered, he didn't know where to start. This is a common mistake. People think clarity means having a full plan. It doesn't. Clarity is not about the whole future. It's about the next honest step. When you've been disconnected, thinking too far ahead brings pressure back. Pressure shuts people down. We already know that. So the question isn't, what should my life look like? The better question is, what direction feels honest right now? Honesty matters more than ambition at this stage. He noticed something when he stopped overthinking. Some choices drained him just thinking about them. Others felt quiet, but grounding. They didn't excite him. They didn't impress anyone. But they felt right. That's an important signal. Right doesn't always feel exciting. Sometimes it feels calm. For teens, this looks like choosing one thing to learn, instead of trying everything. A skill. A hobby. Something meaningful enough to return to. For adults, it might look like simplifying. Letting go of things that drain you. Choosing depth over breadth. Here's the rule that helped him. Don't choose what makes you feel impressive. Choose what makes you feel stable. Stability is underrated. But it's what allows growth. When you choose too many directions, you recreate chaos. When you choose one direction carefully, your system relaxes. He asked himself 3 simple questions. 1. Does this matter to me, even a little? 2. Can I do this without burning myself out? 3. Am I choosing this to grow, not to escape? Those questions filtered everything. Some options disappeared immediately. Others stayed. Quietly. He didn't rush to commit. He tested gently. A few days. A week. Not a lifetime promise. This is important. Direction does not require permanence. It requires attention. You are allowed to adjust. You are allowed to learn. You are allowed to change your mind. What matters is movement with awareness. Staying stuck hurts more than choosing imperfectly. He chose one thing. Not because it fixed his life, but because it gave his days shape. Shape matters. Shape creates rhythm. Rhythm creates safety. And safety allows meaning to grow. You don't find meaning all at once. You build it through consistency. One direction. One practice. One honest choice repeated. If you're listening and feeling overwhelmed, pause. You don't need clarity about everything. You only need clarity about what you'll give attention to next. Choose the direction that feels manageable, feels honest, doesn't require pretending. That's enough. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens after you choose. How consistency turns direction into identity. How to stay with one direction without losing yourself. Choosing a direction is one thing. Staying with it is another. This is where most people break trust with themselves again. Not because they chose wrong, but because they expected the choice to feel good immediately. It doesn't. After a few days, the new direction starts to feel ordinary. The excitement fades. The clarity softens. And the old voice returns. Is this really it? Shouldn't this feel more meaningful? That voice isn't intuition. It's impatience. He almost listened to it. After a week, the thing he chose felt small again. Not impressive. Not life-changing. Just something he did. That's when he understood something important. Meaning doesn't arrive first. Meaning forms. Most people quit right before meaning starts to appear. They leave because the feeling is gone. But the feeling was never the foundation. Consistency is. This is where freedom quietly grows. Not in big choices. In repeated ones. Every day he showed up for that one direction. Something changed. Not dramatically. Not all at once. But subtly. His days stopped feeling empty. They weren't exciting. But they weren't scattered. He wasn't chasing 10 things anymore. His mind felt calmer. Because it knew where it was going next. This is something teens understand better than adults. When you focus on one thing, your brain relaxes. When you juggle everything, your brain stays alert and anxious. Stability creates space. Space allows growth. Here's what staying with a direction doesn't mean. It doesn't mean forcing motivation. It doesn't mean being perfect. It doesn't mean doing it every day without fail. It means returning. Even after missed days. Even after boredom. Even after doubt. Returning builds identity. You stop saying, "I'm trying." You start saying, "This is what I do." That shift matters. He noticed his self-talk changing. He stopped saying, "I hope I stick with this," He started saying, "I'll do a little today." That sentence alone rebuilt trust. Self-trust doesn't come from intensity. It comes from follow-through. Even small follow-through. 5 minutes counts. Showing up counts. Stopping before burnout counts. This is where people confuse discipline with punishment. Discipline is not doing more. It's doing what you said. And stopping when you said you would. Reliability is freedom. Because when you trust yourself, your mind stops arguing with you. You don't need motivation anymore. You already decided. He realized something else. Staying with one direction didn't trap him. It freed him from constant decision-making. Decision fatigue disappeared. So did the guilt. His energy returned slowly. Not excitement. Capacity. That's the difference. Capacity lets you handle life. Excitement burns out. This is why freedom doesn't feel loud. It feels steady. If you're listening and wondering, how long do I stay with this? Here's the answer. Stay long enough to become familiar with yourself again. Long enough to stop checking for results. Long enough for resistance to soften. Long enough to feel boring. Because boredom is not failure. It's stability settling in. And stability is where growth actually begins. You're not meant to chase constant meaning. You are meant to build it. One direction. One habit. One honest commitment repeated. That's how broken people rebuild. Not by fixing everything. By choosing something and staying. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when this direction starts shaping who you are. When a choice becomes consistent, it stops being an action and starts becoming identity. Chapter 10 is about that shift. Chapter 10, when your choice becomes who you are. At first, it was just something he did. Something small. Something he chose on purpose. But after a while, it stopped feeling like a task. It started to feel like him. This is the moment most people don't expect. They think identity changes after success, after results, after recognition. But identity changes much earlier than that. It changes the moment you stop arguing with yourself. He noticed it one ordinary day. Someone asked him what he was working on. He answered without hesitation. Not proudly. Not dramatically. Just clearly. That surprised him. Because before, his answers were always uncertain. I'm thinking about. I might try. I'm not sure yet. Now the words came out steady. I'm doing this. That sentence mattered more than he realized. When you speak with clarity, your mind begins to believe you. This is how identity forms. Not from motivation. From repetition. Every day he returned to the same direction. His brain stopped questioning it. The resistance didn't disappear. But it stopped being loud. Because his actions were consistent. And consistency quiets doubt. Most people don't struggle because they lack talent. They struggle because their identity is unstable. One day they see themselves as capable. The next day they see themselves as lost. That swing drains energy. But when you do one thing long enough, your identity settles. You stop asking, "Is this who I am?" Because your actions already answered. This is especially important if you feel broken. When you're broken, you don't trust labels. You don't trust confidence. You don't trust big promises. But you can trust behavior. Behavior doesn't lie. It shows you who you're becoming. He started to notice how people treated him differently. Not because he demanded respect, but because he moved with direction. Direction creates gravity. When you know where you're going, people feel it. You speak less. You explain less. You hesitate less. Not because you're arrogant, but because you're aligned. This is where freedom becomes visible. Not freedom to do anything. Freedom from confusion. Freedom from overthinking. Freedom from self-doubt. You're no longer asking the world who you should be. You're showing it. And here's the part people misunderstand. Identity is not a cage. It's a foundation. A foundation doesn't limit a house. It holds it up. When your identity is weak, every choice feels heavy. When your identity is solid, choices feel lighter. He didn't feel trapped by commitment anymore. He felt relieved. Relieved he didn't have to decide again. This is why reliable people look calm. Their energy isn't wasted on uncertainty. They already know who they are showing up as. If you're listening and thinking, I don't know who I am anymore, start smaller. Identity doesn't begin with personality. It begins with behavior. Pick one thing. Return to it daily. Let your actions speak first. You don't need confidence to build identity. You need consistency. Confidence comes later. This is how broken people become grounded. Not by fixing their thoughts, but by stabilizing their actions. And once your identity stabilizes, your emotions slowly follow. You don't wake up healed. You wake up reliable. And reliability creates freedom. Living with the identity you've chosen. Here's the part no one prepares you for. Once your choices start shaping who you are, you can't pretend anymore. You notice it in small moments. When you feel like quitting, and something inside you says, that's not who we are now. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Just firmly. That voice used to be weak. Barely audible. But repetition strengthened it. This is what people mean when they say discipline builds character. Character isn't personality. It's self-expectation. It's what you do when no one is watching, because you're watching yourself. He felt this one night. He was tired. The excuse was ready. Before, that would have been the end. Now, it wasn't. Not because he was strong, but because stopping felt unfamiliar. That's an important moment. When quitting starts to feel off. When avoidance no longer feels like relief, but like betrayal. This is when discipline stops feeling like effort and starts feeling like alignment. You're no longer forcing yourself. You're protecting who you are becoming. This matters for broken people. Because when you feel broken, your identity feels fragile. You think one bad day ruins everything. One mistake proves you're still weak. But that's not how identity works. Identity isn't erased by a stumble. It's shaped by return. Reliable people don't never fail. They return faster. They don't spiral. They reset. That's maturity. A teenager learning this early changes everything. So does an adult learning it late. The age doesn't matter. The principle does. You don't become reliable by winning every day. You become reliable by refusing to disappear. This is how freedom grows. Not freedom from rules. Freedom from inner chaos. You stop arguing with yourself. You stop negotiating basic promises. Your energy comes back. Not because life is easier, but because you're clearer. Clarity creates calm. Calm creates consistency. Consistency creates identity. Identity creates freedom. This is the chain. And once you feel it, you won't want to go back. Because going back doesn't feel neutral anymore. It feels smaller. That's growth. Not loud. Not visible. But permanent. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when life tests this identity. Because becoming reliable is one thing. Staying reliable when life pushes back is where freedom is truly earned. Chapter 11. When life pushes back. Here's the part no one warns you about. When you finally start showing up for yourself. Life doesn't get quiet. It gets louder. Not because you're doing something wrong, but because change attracts resistance. This is where many people misunderstand discipline. They think discipline protects them from difficulty. It doesn't. Discipline exposes difficulty. Because now you're present enough to feel it. He learned this the hard way. The week he finally felt steady, everything else started to wobble. Unexpected problems. Old habits knocking. People questioning his change. Someone joked, "So you're serious now?" It wasn't meant to hurt. But it landed. Because deep down, he wondered the same thing. This is the moment where identity is tested. Not when things are calm, but when life applies pressure. Pressure doesn't create who you are. It reveals it. Before, pressure pushed him back into avoidance. Now, it forced a decision. Do I return to who I was? Or stand as who I'm becoming? This decision doesn't happen once. It happens daily. Sometimes hourly. And this is where people feel tired. They say, "Why is this so hard?" Here's the truth. It feels hard because you're no longer numbing yourself. You're awake. Awake people feel resistance more clearly. But they also recover faster. Before, one bad day ruined the week. Now, it's just a bad day. That's progress. He noticed something important. Even when he struggled, he didn't disappear. He didn't spiral. He stayed present. Presence is the real win. Life will test you with distractions, with delay, with comfort. Not because it's cruel, but because it's indifferent. Life doesn't care who you're becoming. You do. This is why discipline must be internal. External motivation disappears. External support fades. But self-trust stays. When pressure hits now, he asks a different question. Not, "How do I escape this?" But, "How do I stay reliable here?" That question changes everything. It doesn't demand perfection. It demands honesty. Some days, reliability means doing the full task. Other days, It means doing the minimum without quitting. Reliability is not rigidity. It's continuity. This matters for teens. School pressure, family expectations, social comparison. Life pushes early. And it matters for adults too. Bills, responsibility, fatigue, different forms. Same test. Do you stay reliable when it's uncomfortable? Not perfect. Not impressive. Just present. That's how freedom becomes durable. Freedom built only in comfort collapses. Freedom tested under pressure stabilizes. He realized something else too. Life didn't need him to be stronger. It needed him to be steadier. Strength spikes. Steadiness endures. This is why reliable people last. They don't win every moment, but they don't vanish. And when you stop vanishing, your life starts to recognize you again. Opportunities return. Trust rebuilds. Momentum grows. Not magically. Gradually. This chapter isn't about being tough. It's about staying. Staying when it's awkward. Staying when it's slow. Staying when no one notices. That's how discipline protects freedom. Because freedom isn't fragile. It's trained. Staying when it would be easier to quit. There is a moment that comes after pressure. It's not dramatic. No breakdown. No big decision. It's the moment where you feel tired of trying. Not exhausted. Just worn down. This is the most dangerous moment. Because quitting doesn't feel emotional here. It feels logical. This is too much. I've done enough. I'll come back later. Later is the word that ends most journeys. He noticed this pattern in himself. Not in chaos, but in calm moments after effort. After a long day. After showing up. After doing better than before. That's when the voice came. You've earned rest. Rest isn't the problem. Avoidance disguised as rest is. This is subtle. Because discipline doesn't mean pushing endlessly. It means knowing the difference. Rest restores. Avoidance erases progress. The difference is intention. Are you stopping to recover? Or stopping to escape? He asked himself this one night. The task was small. The excuse was strong. Before, he wouldn't even notice the choice. Now he did. That awareness was uncomfortable. But discomfort is not the enemy. Unconsciousness is. This is what discipline really teaches. Not how to suffer, but how to stay conscious under pressure. Staying doesn't mean doing everything perfectly. It means not disappearing. He learned a rule that changed everything. Never quit on a bad day. Bad days distort judgment. They make temporary feelings sound permanent. On bad days, you simplify. You lower the bar. You do the minimum. But you don't leave. This rule matters for broken people. Because broken people are used to leaving themselves. Emotionally. Mentally. Quietly. Staying feels unnatural at first. Your body wants relief. Your mind wants distraction. But staying doesn't mean resisting forever. It means holding the line long enough. Long enough for emotion to pass. Long enough for clarity to return. Most feelings are temporary. Most regret is permanent. This is where maturity forms. Not in motivation. In patience. Patience is discipline slowed down. And patience protects freedom. Because freedom isn't about doing whatever you want. It's about not being ruled by moods. When you stay through discomfort, you gain authority over yourself. Authority doesn't shout. It settles. He noticed something else too. The pressure didn't disappear, but his reaction changed. He stopped personalizing struggle. Stopped seeing it as failure. Struggle became information. This is where I need structure. This is where I need rest. This is where I need support. Not panic. Not escape. This is how reliable people think. They don't ask, "How do I feel?" They ask, "What keeps me steady?" Steadiness is freedom that lasts. Life will always push. That never stops. What changes is your response. You stop bracing. You stop flinching. You stop running. Not because life is easy, but because you're anchored. And anchoring yourself is the deepest form of self-respect. In the next chapter, we'll talk about how discipline becomes automatic. How effort turns into identity. At first, you force discipline. Then you practice it. Eventually, it becomes who you are. Chapter 12. When discipline stops feeling like discipline. The shift you don't notice at first. Something changes quietly. Not in a dramatic way. Not with motivation. One day, you realize something feels different. The thing you used to fight yourself over doesn't feel like a fight anymore. You still don't feel excited. You still don't feel inspired. But you do it anyway. Not because you're forcing yourself, but because it feels normal now. This is the moment discipline changes shape. Before, discipline felt like effort, like pressure, like resistance. Now, it feels like routine. And routine doesn't ask how you feel. It just happens. He didn't notice the shift at first. That's the strange part. There was no celebration. No milestone. Just a normal day, where he did what he said he would do. And later that night, it hit him. I didn't argue with myself today. That used to be the hardest part. The arguing. Should I? Shouldn't I? Maybe later? Now there was silence. Not emptiness. Stability. This is what people misunderstand about discipline. They think discipline is always uncomfortable. Always heavy. But discipline is only heavy at the beginning. At the beginning, you're fighting your old identity. Your old habits. Your old escapes. That fight takes energy. But once the habit becomes familiar, the fight ends. You're no longer fighting yourself. You're cooperating with who you've become. This is why reliable people look calm. Not because life is easy, but because there's less inner conflict. Most exhaustion doesn't come from work. It comes from decision fatigue. From constantly debating with yourself. When discipline becomes routine, decisions disappear. You don't decide to brush your teeth. You just do it. You don't debate showing up. You show up. That's freedom. Not freedom from effort. Freedom from friction. This matters deeply for people who feel broken. Because when you're broken, everything feels heavy. Even small tasks feel overwhelming. But routine lightens the load. It removes choice from moments where choice drains you. You don't need to feel strong every day. You just need a structure that carries you. Discipline becomes that structure. Not as punishment, as support. This is where people finally understand. Discipline isn't the opposite of freedom. It's what creates it. Because freedom without structure collapses. And structure without freedom suffocates. The balance is reliability. Being able to trust yourself, even on ordinary days. He didn't feel powerful. He felt steady. And steadiness changed everything. In next part, we'll explore how discipline becomes automatic, why relapse feels different now, and how freedom stabilizes instead of fading. When discipline stops feeling forced, it starts shaping your future quietly. When freedom becomes stable, at some point, something settles. Not excitement. Not pride. Stability. You wake up and the day doesn't feel heavy. Not because life is easy, but because your inner world is quieter. This is what people confuse for boredom. They say, "I don't feel the same drive anymore." What they're really feeling is peace without chaos. Chaos used to give life intensity, urgency. Now that chaos is gone, the calm feels unfamiliar. This is a dangerous misunderstanding. Because some people mistake calm for emptiness and go looking for noise again. They quit structure. They loosen habits. Not because they're weak, but because they don't recognize stability yet. Stability doesn't shout. It doesn't rush. It simply holds. He almost made that mistake. He thought, "Is this it?" No struggle. No emotional spikes. Just steady days. Then he realized something important. This steadiness was what he had been chasing all along. Not excitement. Not escape. But relief. Relief from arguing with himself. Relief from starting over again and again. Relief from feeling unreliable. This is the kind of freedom discipline creates. Not freedom to do anything. Freedom to trust yourself. Trust changes how you move. You don't rush anymore. You don't panic. You don't need constant motivation. Because your life no longer depends on mood. Mood is unstable. Structure is not. This matters for teens. When you're young, emotions feel huge. Everything feels urgent. Discipline teaches something powerful early. You don't have to obey how you feel. And it matters for adults too. Because years of inconsistency create quiet shame. Shame drains energy. Reliability removes shame. You stop promising what you won't keep. You stop lying to yourself. That honesty creates dignity. Dignity feels different from confidence. Confidence can disappear. Dignity stays. He noticed this in small moments. He said no without guilt. He said yes without fear. He no longer overcommit. Because he trusted his limits. Chapter 13. When reliability spreads into your life. How trust begins to multiply. Something subtle starts happening once you become reliable. Not overnight. Not dramatically. Your life begins to respond differently to you. Not because you demanded anything, but because consistency sends a signal. Reliability is quiet communication. It tells the world, I'll be here. He didn't notice it at first. That's important. The changes were small. People stopped checking in as much. Stopped reminding him. They assumed he would handle it. Before, that assumption would have felt heavy. Now, it felt natural. That's how trust begins. Trust isn't built through big promises. It's built through repeated follow-through. Especially when no one is watching. This matters because broken people often believe, no one trusts me. But the deeper truth is harder to face. They don't trust themselves yet. And the world mirrors that. Once self-trust forms, external trust follows. Not instantly, but inevitably. He saw this at work. Tasks started landing on his desk without explanation. No micromanaging. Just expectation. Expectation is not pressure. It's confidence from others. That confidence felt strange at first. He wondered if he deserved it. That doubt didn't disappear immediately. But his behavior answered it. He did the work. He followed through. No speeches. No self-praise. Just consistency. Reliability changes how people speak to you. They become more direct. More honest. Because clarity invites clarity. This applies to friendships too. People stopped testing him. Stopped waiting for disappointment. They relaxed around him. Relaxation is a form of trust. Before, relationships felt tense. Uncertain. Now they felt simpler. Not perfect. Just stable. Stability is underrated. Especially in a world addicted to intensity. Teenagers feel this shift too. When you start showing up consistently, teachers treat you differently. Friends rely on you differently. Even family listens differently. Not because you changed your personality, but because you changed your behavior. Behavior carries weight. More than words. This is where many people get uncomfortable. Because reliability removes excuses. You can't hide behind potential anymore. You're no longer almost. You're present. Presence creates responsibility. Not punishment. Ownership. Ownership changes how you see your time. You stop wasting it carelessly. Not because you're strict, but because you respect yourself now. Respect doesn't shout. It adjusts behavior quietly. He noticed he said no more often. Not out of arrogance, but out of alignment. Reliable people protect their energy. Not selfishly. Intentionally. This is where discipline becomes social. Your habits don't just affect you anymore. They shape your environment. When you're unreliable, people brace. When you're reliable, people lean in. Leaning in creates opportunity. Not opportunity you chase. Opportunity that finds you. This doesn't mean life becomes easy. It means effort becomes meaningful. Meaning fuels endurance. Endurance builds freedom. He didn't feel special. He felt useful. Usefulness is grounding. Especially for people who once felt broken. When you contribute consistently, you stop questioning your value. You live it. This is the quiet reward of reliability. Not praise. Not applause. Belonging. In the next part, we'll go deeper into how reliability reshapes your future and why purpose becomes clearer, and how freedom expands without chaos. When you become reliable, your life starts arranging itself around you. How purpose and freedom take shape. At some point, you notice something else changing. Your life doesn't just feel steadier. It starts to feel clearer. Before, everything felt scattered. Too many ideas. Too many maybes. You wanted many things, but trusted yourself with none of them. That confusion is exhausting. Reliability simplifies life. Not by limiting you, but by narrowing your focus. Focus is not restriction. It's direction. He noticed this when choices became easier. Not because options disappeared, but because standards appeared. Reliable people don't ask, "What could I do?" They ask, "What should I do next?" That question changes everything. Purpose doesn't arrive as a feeling. It arrives as responsibility. Responsibility sounds heavy until you experience it. Responsibility gives your effort meaning. Without responsibility, effort feels pointless. With responsibility, effort feels chosen. This is where freedom matures. Freedom isn't about endless options. That's overwhelming. Real freedom is knowing where to invest yourself. He stopped chasing every possibility. Not because he was afraid, but because he was committed. Commitment gives life weight. Weight gives life meaning. This matters for teens deeply. Teen years are filled with pressure to figure it out. That pressure creates paralysis. Reliability offers a different path. You don't need to know your whole future. You need to show up today. Purpose is built from reliable days. Adults feel this too. Years of inconsistency blur identity. Blur direction. Reliability sharpens both. You begin to see patterns. What you're good at. What you care about. Not in theory. In practice. Practice reveals truth faster than thinking. He realized something quietly. The life he wanted wasn't far away. It was delayed by inconsistency. Once consistency arrived, so did momentum. Momentum is freedom in motion. Not rushing. Not forcing. Just moving forward without resistance. This is how discipline pays you back. Not with instant rewards, but with compound trust. You trust yourself. Others trust you. Opportunities trust you. That trust creates space. Space to grow skills. Space to rest without guilt. Space to say no to what doesn't matter. Freedom expands quietly. You don't feel trapped by structure. You feel supported by it. Structure becomes scaffolding. Scaffolding lets you build higher. This is why disciplined lives don't feel small. They feel intentional. Intentional living feels powerful. Not because it's flashy, but because it's yours. He stopped asking, "What if I fail?" and started asking, "What if I stay?" Staying is underrated. Staying builds mastery. Staying builds trust. Staying builds a life you recognize. This chapter matters because this is the expansion phase. Reliability no longer feels internal. It shapes your world. Your days align. Your relationships stabilize. Your future stops feeling vague. Not because you control everything, but because you're consistent within yourself. That consistency is freedom. In the next chapter, we'll talk about what happens when life slows down, and how to keep growing without urgency. When your life stops pulling you in every direction, you finally have space to move forward on purpose. Chapter 14: Learning to Begin Without Certainty. Starting without the map. Most people think they're stuck because they don't know the next step. But that's not the real problem. The real problem is that they think they need the whole plan before they move. They want certainty before action. So they wait. They wait for clarity. They wait for confidence. They wait for the fear to disappear. And while they're waiting, life keeps moving without them. Here's something no one tells you early enough. Clarity comes after movement, not before. Think about how you learned to walk. No one gave you instructions. No one promised you wouldn't fall. You stood. You fell. You stood again. And somehow, your body figured it out. Starting again works the same way. The people who rebuild their lives are not the ones with the best plans. They're the ones willing to move without guarantees. They don't know if it will work. They don't know if they'll fail again. They don't know if this path will last. They move anyway. That's not recklessness. That's courage in its simplest form. A real story. There was a man who lost everything he thought defined him. His job. His routine. His sense of usefulness. 4 months, he didn't rebuild. He survived. Woke up late. Watched days blur together. Avoided people. One day, not because he felt motivated, but because the silence became unbearable, he did one small thing. He volunteered to help a neighbor fix a fence. No plan. No vision. Just effort. That fence didn't change his life. But something else did. He remembered what it felt like to be useful. That moment didn't give him answers. It gave him direction. From there, he tried another thing. Then another. None of them were perfect. Some failed. But he was moving. And movement brought information. Information brought confidence. Confidence brought choice. Waiting would have brought nothing. This is the truth. You don't start again by finding the right path. You start by choosing a path. The path corrects itself once you're walking. Trusting the person you're becoming. Starting without certainty is hard. But staying stuck is harder. It just hurts slower. Most people don't fear failure as much as they fear discovering they can't trust themselves. They say things like, "I don't want to quit again. I don't want to disappoint myself again. I don't want to start and stop." That fear is real. And it makes sense. But here's the shift that changes everything. You don't rebuild trust by waiting until you're sure. You rebuild trust by doing what you say you'll do, small and often. Not big promises. Small agreements. I'll wake up at this time. I'll spend 30 minutes on this. I'll show up today, even if it's messy. Every time you keep one small promise, your mind learns something new. I can rely on myself. That's how freedom grows. Not suddenly. Not dramatically. Quietly. Steadily. There is no perfect restart. There is only an honest one. You are allowed to begin again without knowing who you'll become. You'll meet that person along the way. And maybe the most important thing to understand is this. You don't need to catch up to anyone. You're not late. You're rebuilding. And rebuilding always looks slower from the outside, but stronger on the inside. If all you do today is choose one direction instead of standing still, that is not small. That is the beginning. If you recognized yourself in this chapter, if something here felt familiar, uncomfortable, or quietly true, there's nothing you need to do with that yet. You don't need to change anything tonight. You don't need to understand everything. Just notice that you're still listening. That you stayed. That some part of you didn't turn away. The next chapter isn't about effort. It's about staying present when you feel tired of trying. So don't brace yourself. Don't prepare. Just stay here. This is where we talk directly to you. Chapter 15. If you're still here, that counts. Staying when you're tired of trying. If you feel broken, this chapter is not here to test you. It's not here to challenge you. It's not here to ask for effort you don't have. It's here to sit with you. When people hear the word broken, they imagine something obvious. They imagine someone crying uncontrollably. Someone unable to get out of bed. Someone whose life has clearly fallen apart. But most broken people don't look like that. They wake up. They go to school or work or wherever life asks them to be. They respond when spoken to. They do what's expected. From the outside, they look fine. From the inside, they feel distant. Broken doesn't always mean pain. Sometimes it means disconnection. Like you're present in body, but not fully here in yourself. You may not even know when it started. There wasn't a single moment. Just a slow shift. You stopped expecting much. You stopped wanting too much. You stopped caring deeply because caring felt expensive. At first, that felt like relief. Less disappointment. Less effort. Less emotional risk. But over time, relief turned into emptiness. Not sadness. Not anger. Just a dull sense that life is passing while you're watching. That's the kind of brokenness people don't talk about. Because there's no emergency. No collapse. Nothing dramatic enough to demand attention. So you tell yourself you're fine. You say, others have it worse. You say, I'm just tired. You say, this is just how life is. But something inside you knows that's not the full truth. Here's something important to understand. You didn't become broken because you failed. You became broken because you adapted. You adapted to pressure. To disappointment. To expectations you couldn't keep up with forever. You learned how to survive by numbing parts of yourself. And survival worked. You made it through. But survival is not the same as living. Living requires presence. And presence feels hard when you're exhausted. That's why this chapter is not asking you to choose your life in a big way. It's not asking for motivation. It's not asking you to suddenly care deeply again. It's asking for something much smaller. Much gentler. It's asking you not to leave. Not leaving doesn't mean doing more. It means staying aware when you want to disappear. Disappearing doesn't always look like giving up. Sometimes it looks like distraction. Endless scrolling. Background noise all day. Never sitting still long enough to feel anything. Sometimes disappearing looks like comfort. Sleeping too long. Eating to avoid feeling. Choosing what's easiest instead of what's meaningful. None of that makes you weak. It makes you human. But here's the quiet danger. If disappearing becomes a habit, you slowly lose contact with yourself. You don't wake up one day feeling lost. You wake up one day realizing you haven't really been here for a long time. That's why staying matters more than effort right now. Staying means noticing when you're numbing out and pausing. Not to judge yourself. Not to fix anything. Just to notice. Notice is powerful. Because you can't return to yourself if you don't know when you've left. Many broken people think they need to change before they're allowed back into their own lives. That's not true. You don't earn your way back to yourself. You allow yourself back. If all you can do today is listen and stay present for these minutes, that is enough. If you still feel numb, but you didn't turn away, that matters. Broken people heal by staying connected, not by becoming impressive. This chapter is not the end of your story. It's the moment where you stop leaving it. In the next part of this chapter, we will talk about how to return gently, without forcing yourself, without collapsing back into numbness, and without losing yourself again. Returning without losing yourself. If you've stayed with this audiobook until now, something is already happening. Not a breakthrough. Not a transformation. Just awareness. Awareness is quiet. It doesn't announce itself. But it changes everything. When you feel broken, awareness often arrives as discomfort. You start noticing how often you disappear. How often you avoid stillness. How quickly you reach for something to fill the space. That noticing can feel unsettling. You might think, why am I only seeing this now? Or worse, I've wasted so much time. Let's stop that thought gently. You did not waste time. You were surviving. Survival narrows your focus. It teaches you how to get through, not how to feel alive. Now that you're no longer in constant crisis, your body and mind are allowing space again. That space can feel uncomfortable, empty, quiet. Many people rush to fill that space. They add noise. They add busyness. They add goals. But broken people don't need more demands. They need a way to return without pressure. Returning does not mean becoming productive. It means becoming present. Presence is not intensity. It's honesty. Honesty sounds like this. I don't feel okay, but I'm still here. I don't know what I want yet. I feel disconnected. Most people try to skip that honesty. They jump straight to fixing. But fixing without honesty only creates another layer of distance. Returning to yourself happens in small, quiet moments. Moments that don't look impressive. A real example. There was a man who realized he felt broken not because his life was falling apart, but because it was on autopilot. He woke up every day, followed routines, handled responsibilities. But at night, he felt empty. Not sad. Just absent. One evening, instead of distracting himself, he sat in silence for 10 minutes. It felt uncomfortable. His mind raced. He wanted to stop. But he stayed. Nothing magical happened. But he noticed something. He had been avoiding his own thoughts for years. That night didn't heal him. It reconnected him. That's how return works. It doesn't fix everything. It brings you back into contact. From contact comes trust. Trust doesn't come from big promises. Broken people have heard too many promises already. Trust comes from small consistency. From staying when it would be easier to disappear. You don't rebuild your life by pushing yourself forward. You rebuild it by not leaving yourself behind. Some days, returning will feel simple. You'll notice yourself drifting and gently come back. Other days, returning will feel heavy. You'll want to numb out. You'll want to sleep through the day. On those days, the goal is not progress. The goal is presence. Ask yourself one question only. Am I still here with myself? If the answer is even a small yes, that is enough for today. Broken people often believe they must feel different before they can live differently. That's not true. Feeling changes after action, but the action can be very small. Sitting, breathing, listening without distraction. You don't need motivation to return. You need permission. Permission to go slow. Permission to be unfinished. Permission to not know yet. If you've been waiting for the moment you feel ready, that moment may never come. Readiness is often a story fear tells. Presence is what actually heals. Choosing your life doesn't mean making huge changes. It means choosing not to abandon yourself today. And tomorrow, if you forget, you can return again. Returning is not failure. It is the practice. This is what freedom looks like for broken people. Not endless choice, but the ability to stay present with yourself. You are not broken beyond repair. You are disconnected, and disconnection can be healed. Healing doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means becoming available to yourself again. Your life is not behind you. It's happening quietly, waiting for your attention. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to prove anything. Just stay. Stay when it's uncomfortable. Stay when it's boring. Stay when you don't know what comes next. That staying is not weakness. It's courage in its quietest form. This audiobook was written for moments like this. Not moments of clarity. Moments of uncertainty. You don't need to change tonight. You don't need to decide anything. If you feel broken, staying is enough. Your life is not asking for perfection. It's asking for your presence. And if someday you forget this, you can listen again. Not to fix yourself, but to remember. You never left completely. Stay with yourself. If you're still here, thank you for staying. Not just with this audiobook, but with yourself. You didn't listen to this because everything was fine. You listened because something in you wanted company. Something wanted to feel understood. This audiobook wasn't meant to rush you forward. It wasn't meant to tell you who to become. It was meant to remind you of something simple. You're still here. And that matters. You don't need to leave this moment with answers. You don't need to feel fixed. You don't need to promise yourself anything tonight. If all this audiobook did was help you stay present a little longer than usual, it did its job. Healing doesn't always feel like progress. Sometimes it feels like quiet. Sometimes it feels like rest. Sometimes it just feels like not disappearing. Wherever you are right now, in your room, on a walk, on your bed, or in the middle of a long day, take one slow breath. You don't have to carry everything tonight. You can set some of it down. And if you found something here that helped you feel less alone, you're welcome to stay connected. You can subscribe to Beyond the Noise Studio for more quiet audiobooks like this. Not to motivate you, but to sit with you when things feel heavy, confusing, or quiet. You don't have to listen all the time. Just know it's here when you need a steady voice again. And if someday you feel yourself drifting, you can come back to this audiobook, to your breath, to yourself. You are not broken beyond repair. You are human, and you're allowed to take this one step at a time. Thank you for listening. Thank you for staying. And when you're ready, we'll be right here. If this message spoke to you, share it. Subscribe. Keep listening. This is Beyond the Noise Studio.